If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at Ordinary Women Podcast, on Twitter at Ordinary Women PC, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Ordinary Women. I'm welcoming Nida today. Hi Nida, how are you?
Hey Lucy, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining and for accepting to participate.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited too. Can you start by giving us a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Of course, yeah. Hey everyone, I am Nida Beg. I was born and raised in Bangalore, South India, and I currently live in Seattle, Washington. I moved to the United States about 8 years ago to expose myself to a different culture and for better career opportunities. I am a woman in STEM and I'm currently a technical product manager at Amazon. And I am deeply passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and improving the participation of women in STEM.
That's super cool. So excited to hear about this more. Can you tell us something unusual about yourself?
Unusual? Oh, wow. Okay. I think one of the things that I find the most unusual about me is that I am a hobby bouncer. I love trying out new things, but my interest is so short spanned. But while it lasts, it's usually very all or nothing sort of an effort. Right. So as an effort, as a result, I have probably tried every art out there, crocheting, gardening, pottery, painting, all types of paintings, watercolor, acrylic, drawing. I've tried digital art and illustration. I've tried calligraphy, hand lettering, embossing. Oh wow. I've also tried to learn a ton of instruments, violin, tin whistle, guitar. But because my interest in something is so deep but so short-lived, I've never become proficient at any one thing. And I think that that's rather unusual and kind of like not aligned with my core value system. So I think that me being a hobby bouncer is something that I find really unusual about me.
Yeah, that definitely is. That's quite funny. Is there anything at all with which you sticked?
Nothing at all. But if there's one that I maybe like keep going back to time and again, is probably painting. I really enjoy watercolor, and I probably go back to that like time and again. But I have never stuck to it. Like I'll usually, order all sorts of paints and colors and papers, and I'll do it for like maybe a month or two, and then I just like get really out of it. I fall out of love with the art, and I don't touch my things for like years. But I think painting is something that I've kind of like gone back to a couple of times.
That's kind of cool to like be interested in kind of a lot of things though. What's your current passion?
I have been really interested in gardening. So I've kind of like
Ooh.
grown a bunch of like seedlings. I'm kind of like just waiting the weather in here Pacific Northwest in the US to get a little better, but I'm hoping I'll like hopefully last through it at least this season.
Oh, that's super cool. Thank you so much for sharing. And because here, obviously, in this podcast, we talk a lot about being a woman, I like to start by asking, was there a moment or an event in your life when you realized that you are a woman?
Yeah, there hasn't been any one particular instance where I've realized I'm a woman. Rather, it's been like several years of learning and unlearning that has led me to realize what a superpower and how blessed I am to be a woman. I'm so proud of my upbringing, of where I am today, and I'm really excited about what tomorrow holds for me in this world as a woman. As I mentioned, I grew up in South India as a Muslim woman. My father passed away, unfortunately, when I was 11 years old. So my two sisters and I have primarily been raised by my grandmother and my mom. And growing up in an all-woman household, but in a community and country where we are gender and religious minority, there were several instances that left me conflicted and grappling with my identity as a woman growing up. So in my home, I always felt super empowered and was always encouraged to be curious, to always keep learning, to be myself, and to always invest in my growth. But outside my home, I was always told to lower my gaze, to not speak too much, to not be dressed a certain way, or to not pursue a certain degree or a career. It was all very confusing growing up, kind of like living in these two identities. But I think the real game changer for me was when I learned to listen to only voices that mattered, the voices where I felt supported and encouraged. And my family always encouraged me and my sisters to not limit ourselves. So my older sister, she moved to the US to pursue her PhD, and I moved soon after to pursue my master's. The culture in the US was definitely different from the one that we had grown up in. But through my 8+ years of journey in the corporate world and watching women from various backgrounds and faiths and stories here has definitely given me more confidence in how I carry myself in the outside world in a way that feels more authentic to me and in a way that's also authentic to my South Indian upbringing and roots, which is something that I'm super proud of. So today, even today, like when I walk into meetings, sometimes I'm usually the only woman in the room, and a lot of feelings like imposter syndrome and some of my old habits from my growing up years of lowering my gaze, speaking softly, not speaking too much, they tend to creep back in. But I have to remind myself that as a woman, I mean, what I bring to the table are traits like inclusion first thinking, leading with empathy, and traits that are important to shape corporate cultures. So I will look everyone in the room, I will use my voice, and I will be a game changer. Right. So it's been like several years of learning and unlearning, and kind of like several instances that have made me realize that I'm a woman. Several years of kind of going through different emotions of what that means. But I'm like super excited and proud of where I've landed today.
It sounds like you really found a way to live like a peaceful way where you're happy and you really own it. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's been like a lot of years coming, and I think that there's still kind of like a lot of years to go.
Yeah, and that there is so much of of sexism to unlearn.
Yep.
So I feel that when you start on that journey, you just discover so much and realize so much about yourself as well that was sort of blocked because of what you've been taught, kind of what you said at the beginning, like don't look down, don't cover yourself, stuff like that. And then, yeah. But yeah, it sounds like you're really owning it now. That's super cool.
Yes, I am really proud.
Would you have like one advice for anyone who's listening on how to own it?
I guess I'm like still trying to figure out what that means, because I think like some of the childhood conditioning is really hard to kind of like leave behind. But one of the ways that you can kind of go about realizing your full power is constantly like teaching yourself what you bring to a room, what you bring to a particular team that you're currently like a part of, or a particular company that you're building. It's important to constantly remind yourself that you are important, your voice is important, and how you've been raised, or a community or a culture that you were raised in, is not necessarily going to be the culture tomorrow. So also being a part of making that change is something, being a change maker is also something that's really, really critical in letting go what you've been taught and in kind of like growing into someone that feels more authentic to yourself.
Such wise words. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I'll try to apply that. And growing up, did you have any female role model?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My mom. She was not just my role model as a child, but also she is my best friend and my biggest mentor today. Right. So a little bit about my mom. She was married when she was 18 years old, and she had me when she was just 20. And after she was married, like for the first 10, 11 years of my life, she was a homemaker, and that was her entire identity. But after my father passed away, she really stepped up in a way that to date is something that really amazes me. She not only educated and raised her three daughters, but she also educated herself and got a job to support us. She taught us the importance of education, the importance of hard work, the importance of being independent, of being authentic, of being grounded in our values. And she did all of this in a world where it was rather unusual and frowned upon for women to be all of these things. And how she handled like in an unfortunate incident of my dad passing away, and her life after that has single-handedly like shaped who me and my sisters are today, and what we bring to people that we interact with in the societies that we live in and cultures that we are a part of. She's like single-handedly just shaped all of that.
It sounds like an amazing person. Yeah, like go your mom. And it sounds like you had a very women-heavy surrounding with your grandma, your mom, your two sisters.
Oh yes, yeah. It was an all woman household. Like there were no men in my house growing up. So everything that I've kind of like learned has been from watching women around me come into their full power and kind of like dictating how they should be treated in the society and how they are perceived. So it's definitely like I feel really empowered having grown up in an all woman household.
Super cool. And what about today? Do you have any female role model?
Um, yeah, I mean, I have continued to kind of like lean on my mom as a mentor and as a role model. But there's also like several women that I have met across in my professional journey and from the industry, who I look at as role models, right? So several mentors and sponsors at work who constantly teach me what it brings, not just to kind of be a change maker and to lift kind of like the environments and the cultures that we build at work today, but how you also bring in individuals together in that success, right? So a lot of mentors and sponsors who have taught me that essentially like a rising tide should lift all boats. Who've taught me that emotional agility is the key to personal growth, and I've learned a lot from watching and working with these women leaders at Amazon. And yeah, it's just been really empowering as well. And one of the things that they've also taught me is that as a woman, like the emotional intelligence that we bring into the room makes us like some of the best leaders for tomorrow and some of the best trailblazers. And I've learned what it's like to lead with empathy and to create inclusive cultures and microcultures that will hopefully inspire change.
Super cool. How do you apply these? How did you create these?
The microcultures?
Yeah.
One of the ways that I've of course, it's been like a lot of, I'm still learning and I'm not a perfect human being, right?
Mhm.
But I think one of the ways that we kind of go into that is first just talking, bringing like people in the company or teams or groups that we're part of, like bringing them together and understanding like what some of their pain points are. And I've worked with like I think at least two or three different groups of women across in my time at Amazon, and I've learned that the needs of each of these groups have been like very different. Some groups of women want like better coaching and like better opportunities to kind of further their career in tech. Some women want like a better network, or kind of like want a better support system. And some women are essentially like looking to kind of like still kind of like identifying like how do we build like these cultures. So kind of like getting the groups together, identifying like what their needs are, and then championing for them and teaching them how to champion for it themselves, is one of the ways that we can kind of like go about building like these inclusive cultures or microcultures.
That's super cool. That's amazing to create this. That's, yeah, very inspiring. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it definitely must, yeah, help so many of these women. That's very cool. And show them that there is another way, probably, and that, yeah. That's very cool. Um, and as you grew up, did the lack of representation of women in society impact you?
Yeah, so as a child, like I said, growing up in an all-women household and seeing my mom do things in the society that I grew up in was very encouraging. But it wasn't really until I moved to work in corporate America that the lack of women in STEM or science, technology, engineering, and math that really impacted me. This lack of representation of women in STEM in general has definitely slowed down my growth in a way that it took me a couple of years to realize that that was happening, right? Because when I grew up, growing up, like I said, I was just surrounded by women, and it felt like everything was within reach. That the essentially sky was the limit. So I was learning a lot from watching the women that I was surrounded with. But moving to corporate America, there were fewer women, that especially few women that looked like me and that carried themselves like me in leadership roles. So it was really hard for me to kind of understand and imagine how I could be that leader when I wasn't seeing anyone that looked like me lead. I'd always look around the room and mostly see only men, and that really exaggerated like a lot of my Imposter syndrome. It slowed down my growth in a professional space. A lot of work still kind of like needs to be done in this space in terms of like ensuring that there's diversity, that there's more women in leadership positions. But corporates, especially like Amazon, are investing more and more time and effort to change that, and that's been kind of like really enduring for me to see. Like even over just the last 3 or 4 years, the amount of investment that my leadership team, that allies that I'm surrounded with, the sponsors that I currently have, has is kind of like really helped elevate like some of those feelings, and really helped me grow faster.
Oh, that's an amazing yeah, that's super cool. I'm glad that you have all these people. You really seem to be in an environment, especially at work, that really allows you to explore that and like give you the tool and the space to do more about it. It's very, very cool. I'm glad things are finally changing.
Absolutely, and it's been really, really nice to kind of like see that, like coming from not really understanding what it means to be a woman, especially a woman in STEM, to understanding or kind of identifying that I am a woman in STEM, and within that I am a minority in certain rooms, and how I can use my voice and how I can use my time and effort to not just change that for me, but also champion that for like larger groups, and for underrepresented talent in general, has been really, really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds so. And you mentioned allies. Do you feel that men at work or like around you understand what it is and challenge themselves into becoming better? Or like becoming better. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not the correct, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like all of these words, like allyship, sponsorship, are I feel like are kind of fairly new, right? So, for some of the groups, there's still a lot of educating that needs to be done, a lot of being told what it means to be an ally, being like providing resources to kind of like men in leadership roles, and letting them know how they can support me better, and women in the group in general better. There's kind of like definitely a lot of education that still needs to happen. But I haven't met a single person at Amazon, at least, who I've talked to and told them what, and kind of explained to them what allyship means, and kind of like heard back in return saying, oh, I do not support that. Everybody's been like super, super supportive, in terms of not just understanding, but also in terms of executing it, in terms of actually being an ally, in terms of actually being supporting change, in terms of actually showing up. So it's been really nice.
Great, such a great experience to have. I'm so glad that you have this. And talking more about you, I'd like to jump on kind of the second part of this podcast and talk about an achievement, project, or life experience of which you're proud and that you want to focus about in this discussion. Can you tell us what you want to talk about?
Yeah, we've touched upon like some of the topics already that I wanted to talk about today, right? Which is essentially like what entails navigating the corporate world as a woman in science, technology, engineering, and math or STEM, and being a change maker, right? So I think that that's a topic that I carry like super close to my heart and something that I'm super passionate about. Because personally, it's been quite a journey from just being like a software developer or being a business analyst, to kind of identifying myself as I am a woman software developer. I am a woman product manager, and what I bring to the table could look slightly different from what other people bring to the table, and how I think could be different from how others think. And kind of like coming into that in full power is something that I'm like super proud of, and helping other women also identify that, and also kind of like talk through some of the things that we can do to change that, and to kind of be better positioned for kind of like the next set, or the next generation of women coming into STEM, is something that I'm really proud of, and would love to discuss that about in more detail today.
Yeah, that's super cool. So when did you start to have to have this in mind or to work on that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I had, I've been with Amazon for a little over 5.5 years now, and I've been in the STEM industry for about 10, 11 years now. And one of the things that when kind of like changed careers from engineering to technical product management, which is kind of like slightly, when I essentially went from like early to kind of mid career and found myself in like more leadership sort of roles. I started to notice that I was in more and more meetings where I was the only woman, right, and where I was the only woman who was making like in a leadership role, making decisions, thinking through some of the things, thinking through like where the business should be going tomorrow, and initially like I realized that I was very quiet, and I would usually like walk out of meetings being like, why didn't I say this? Like I had this amazing thought, why didn't I share it with a larger group? And that kind of like really led me to talk to more people who looked like me, right? So I reached out to like a lot of women within kind of like my larger groups and ask them if they've had similar experiences, and just try to ask them like, how did you navigate this, right? And I'd been kind of like lucky at that point and continue to be so, being surrounded by quite a lot of women in kind of my larger organizations within Amazon, who are leading large teams, who are kind of like being change makers and who are just being awesome in general. And that was kind of thing like the turning point for me of being like, okay, it's okay. I am the only one that looks like me in this room, and I'm the only one that thinks like me in this room, and that's okay. And that's kind of like the strength that I bring to the table, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm on this table, because of who I am. And so I think that that was kind of really the turning point for me.
Super cool. How did you arrive to all of these conclusions? Because it must take a lot of not only self-reflection, but I don't know. That's why I ask. But on all of these subjects, of course, there is some self-reflection that is absolutely necessary, but there is also a lot of external information that helps you to realize these. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's definitely like a combination of you seeking help, right? Like if at that
Mm.
point in time I hadn't realized that I need to talk to more people who look like me to understand why I'm feeling a certain way, I wonder if I would have stayed boxed in those thoughts, right? But you kind of like nailed it, right, right. So there's definitely a lot of self-reflection that needs to be done, and kind of like combining that with the information that you're receiving is definitely the key.
Yeah. And how did you find similar people who helped you?
So Amazon hosts like a lot of these fireside chats, which is essentially like like there's a group of folks already who bring in senior leaders to come in and talk about like their work and just things in general. And so I think I had kind of like attended a couple of these fireside chats, and one of the women leaders at Amazon was talking about her experiences, and to kind of hear her say that she was also the only woman in several rooms was like such an aha moment for me. And I was like, wow, this is kind of like really what's happening. And just hearing her talk about her experiences, it was just like her story like really just resonated with me, and it was a really senior woman leader at Amazon back then. And so I was like, okay, I want to talk to more women and see if this is kind of like a general theme or kind of like what's going on. So it was a combination of that, as well as, just going up on YouTube, going up on Google, and trying to understand things like STEM gap, trying to understand things like underrepresented talent, trying to understand things like what is the percentage of women in the workforce today? Looking around my own team and being like, how many women are on this team? So it was definitely that fireside chat was definitely like an aha moment for me.
That's super cool. Yeah, these chats are so important. And that's very cool that your company did that.
100%. It is so
Yeah,
important to talk about these things, and it's definitely, yeah, important. Yeah.
yeah, completely. And it's also, sorry, it's also a lot of work at the end of the day to, well, do all of this research that you've done and self-reflect on all of this. Did you do that on your work time or on your personal time or both?
It's definitely been a combination of both, I think. One of the downsides of being underrepresented talent or being a woman in STEM is that you have to be the change maker, right? So it disproportionately like burdens women to kind of like not just do the work, get all the data points, but also and champion not just for yourself, but also champion for others. That all of that alongside kind of having a full-time job, right? So it definitely is unfortunate, and I'm curious to see like how as leaders and kind of like one of the largest employers across the world, how we kind of like change that. How do we change that women and underrepresented talent are disproportionately burdened of carrying that work of doing of kind of like ensuring that as a community we are supported.
Yeah, completely. And it's so annoying, to make that a euphemism, that, it's so much work. And yeah, either you take some time on your working hours, which is fair because it helps your company grow, and it's work that take time, or you take your personal time to do that. But yeah, either way, I feel that you're still like always losing compared to someone who have more like a white man, for instance. Because if you take your working time, it's time that you don't allocate to the work you're doing to develop your career that they would have. But if you do it on your personal time, then it's less time to rest and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but the hope is just that I feel like we're kind of like just getting started in this whole movement. And one of the things that we constantly say within Amazon is that it's a movement, it's not a moment, right? So we definitely need like folks to invest that time upfront. And the hope is that women kind of coming into STEM tomorrow, women coming into like tech tomorrow, don't face the same barriers and don't have to spend this disproportionate amount of time to kind of like redo the whole work. So that's kind of like I think the hope is that the leaders of tomorrow don't have to women leaders of tomorrow don't have to go through similar experiences today.
Yeah, completely. And yeah, everything that you do is definitely helping on that way. Um, so what's the first thing that you did? Like, what's the action, like actual actions that you did when you realized, okay, this is not okay, I want to be part of, I want to change, I want to challenge myself, challenge the others. What did you do?
Yeah, one of the first things I did was, and I had a lot of guidance from my manager, who's been one of my biggest allies, as well as some of like the HR at Amazon, a lot of diversity equity champions at Amazon. I had a lot of support, but one of the first things we did is put together like in a typical Amazonian way, we tend to write a lot of documents to capture our thoughts and to kind of present it in a clear manner. So we put together like a quick 1 or 2 pager that talked about why it's important to set up a women art group within my particular org that we were part of. As part of that document, we kind of outlined a lot of our findings that we'd had from talking to all the women in the group. And we said, okay, the focus of this group that we will set up is going to be three things. First, we want to hire more women in STEM. Second, we want to ensure that these women have the opportunities to kind of like grow in their careers. And third, we want to ensure that these women have a network so they can feel supported. Right. So we kind of like just put our thoughts together really clearly and took this proposal up the leadership chain all the way to the VP of my org that I was a part of, and just had an open discussion. And I think the first step in many journeys is always the hardest, but it's also the most important. So I think that was the first thing we did.
That's very cool. And what was the reaction from your VP?
Oh my gosh, so much support and so much
Oh,
understanding and empathy. And he was literally like, tell me what you need from me and how can I make this happen? So it was, I think the reaction was definitely very, very encouraging. This is kind of like the first time I was leading something like that. So to kind of like get so much positive reaction was very encouraging and really helped simplify like some of the next steps that would come, which would be the harder parts, is finding the right kind of audience, kind of like kicking off the different chapters, ensuring that the movement continues, and ensuring that there's traction. So yeah, it was definitely a game changer for me, that and like a first hand realization that my voice is important, and I can use my voice not just to champion for myself but also for others.
Definitely, that's so cool. That's amazing. And what's the challenges that you faced?
Um, wow, I wish I had like a great story to say, okay, this is a challenge I had. But I guess like I don't know. Sorry, I can't think of anything top of my mind.
That's fine. I
I
mean,
don't
that's
know.
good for
It's
you,
just,
right?
yeah, which is kind of like really funny because back when I was kind of like doing all of this, one of my first things was, oh my God, why is this so hard? Why am I like the first one speaking up? Like, how come nobody else has noticed this before? So I think the hardest part of this whole thing was just getting the courage myself to kind of go ahead with the whole process. I think was probably the hardest part.
Oh, but that's so cool that you did it. What decided you to do it? 'Cause it is very courageous.
Yeah, so I'd kind of been doing a whole lot of research, right? I was trying to like educate myself and bring myself up to speed, and I remember reading this article that said that girls and women are systematically tracked away from science and math throughout their education, and that in turn like limits their access, preparation, and opportunities to kind of go into these fields as adults. So as a result, women usually only make up about 28% of the workforce in STEM, and men vastly outnumber women majoring in most of these STEM fields in college. And this gender gap has become especially high in fast growing and highest paid jobs today, like computer science and engineering, which are kind of like the two most lucrative STEM fields. And they to date remain heavily male dominated. Right. So I think that for me, like those numbers were really, really alarming. And that really, I was like, I really just felt like I have the right support system in terms of all the allies that I had, in terms of all the support that I had at work, and all I had to do was use my voice. All I had to do was speak these numbers. So I think that really, those numbers were definitely like very encouraging for me.
That's super, well, like, that's not cool, the actual statistics, but yeah, what you made with
Yeah.
that is very, very cool.
Right, yeah.
And what was easier than you thought it would be?
One of the things that was kind of like made the whole journey easiest was just the amount of support and guidance that I got. It was just like to date, like I am still just so amazed by how quickly everybody like came together and said, yes, this is important for you, this is important for us. This is how we are changing. This is what we're going to be doing to change this, and this is how we plan on supporting women better. So I think it was just the amount of support that I got was definitely surprising and very encouraging at the same time.
That's super cool. And yeah, it shows that you definitely are doing something super important that everyone wants to be done. Yeah. And why are you proud of it?
I am super proud of it because I think in the process of championing for myself, I've kind of like found mechanisms and ways to also not just champion for others, but empower them to champion for themselves. Right? Which I think kind of like goes way beyond what I can do in my day-to-day job. In my day-to-day job, I'm, building products for customers that will maybe last 10, 15 years. But the culture and the people that I work with and is I think kind of like the true legacy or the work that I leave behind is just a lot of empowered women.
That's amazing. Yeah, like Yeah, so much to be proud of. That's super, super cool. I'm so happy that you're doing that, honestly. It's so important and so great to hear that you're receiving support and yeah, that people are, well, yeah, supporting you. Cool. Well, we've reached the end of my questions. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned during our discussion and that you wanted to say?
No, I just for all the women that are kind of like listening to this podcast right now, I just want to say that if you're feeling like the STEM field in general is too technical, is too overwhelming, or not supportive, I just want to say please give it a shot. STEM definitely needs more women. All the technologies that dictate like what the future looks like needs women. Right. So definitely invest in yourself and invest in your career in STEM. And yeah, that's about it.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time today and for sharing some bits of your story with me and everyone who's listening. It was so interesting. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. This is definitely, I think, like the first time I've done anything like this, and coming in here and sharing my story has also been, it's been really nice. Thank you for listening to my story.
Oh, thank you so much. And as usual in this podcast, the guest has the very last word, so the mic is yours.
I will go with let's close that STEM gap.